I'll never forget the morning of March 15, 2024. I was sitting in my corner office on the 32nd floor of downtown Chicago, reviewing quarterly reports for my consulting firm, when my secretary Sarah knocked on my door with an expression I'd never seen before. In the 3 years she'd worked for me, Sarah had always been composed, professional, almost to a fault. But that morning her face was pale, and her hands were trembling slightly as she held a piece of paper. "Mrs. Peterson, I need to show you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think someone just tried to steal $800,000 from our company." My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. $800,000? That was nearly a quarter of our annual revenue. I set the mug down carefully and gestured for her to sit. Sarah had been with us since graduating from Northwestern with a degree in business administration. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and had an almost supernatural ability to spot inconsistencies in paperwork. If she thought something was wrong, it probably was. "Tell me everything," I said, leaning forward in my chair. Sarah placed the paper on my desk. It was a printout of an email that had come through our general inquiry inbox 30 minutes earlier. At first glance, it looked legitimate, professional letterhead from what appeared to be a major international bank, formal language, all the right legal terminology. The email claimed that our company had been selected for a business excellence grant of exactly $800,000, and all we needed to do was provide our banking information and pay a processing fee of $15,000 to release the funds. "Most people would be excited about free money," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. But 3 things jumped out at me immediately. I studied the email more carefully. The bank's logo looked authentic, the formatting was professional, and the sender's email address appeared to come from the bank's official domain. To most people this would have seemed like an incredible opportunity. But Sarah wasn't most people. "First," she continued, pointing to a line in the email, "they misspelled compliance as compliance in the 3rd paragraph. A major international bank would never make that mistake in official correspondence." I looked where she was pointing. There it was, a single-letter transposition that most people would have overlooked entirely. But Sarah's attention to detail was legendary. She once caught a $50,000 accounting error because a decimal point was 1 space off in a 200-page financial report. "Second," she said, pointing to another section, "the grammar is slightly off throughout the email. It's subtle, but whoever wrote this isn't a native English speaker. Look at this sentence. 'We are pleased to be informing you of this prestigious award.' A native speaker would say, 'We are pleased to inform you.' It's a small difference, but it's there." I felt a chill run down my spine. The more I looked at the email, the more I could see what Sarah was talking about. The language was formal and professional, but there were tiny inconsistencies throughout that suggested it had been written by someone who spoke English as a second language. "And the third thing?" I asked. Sarah's expression darkened. "I called the bank directly. The phone number in the email goes to a voicemail system that sounds legitimate, but when I called the bank's official customer service line, the one I found on their actual website, they'd never heard of any business excellence grant program. In fact, the woman I spoke with said they'd received dozens of calls about this exact scam in the past week." My blood ran cold. If Sarah hadn't caught this, if she had been anyone else, I might have been excited about the prospect of $800,000 in grant money. In today's competitive business environment, that kind of windfall could have funded our expansion plans for the next 2 years. I might have rushed to respond, eager to claim what seemed like an incredible opportunity. But Sarah's sharp eyes and methodical approach had potentially saved our company from a devastating financial loss. The processing fee of $15,000 was just the beginning. Scammers often start with smaller amounts to establish trust, then gradually increase their demands. By the time victims realize they've been duped, they've often lost tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes even more. "Sarah," I said, looking up at her with genuine admiration, "you may have just saved our company." But as I studied the email more carefully, something else caught my attention. Something that would lead us down a rabbit hole neither of us could have anticipated. The email wasn't just a random scam. It was specifically targeted at our company, mentioning details about our recent projects that weren't public information. Someone had done their homework before crafting this deception. Who were these scammers and how did they know so much about us? The next morning, I arrived at the office to find Sarah already at her desk, surrounded by printed emails, bank statements, and what looked like a detective's evidence board. She'd been there since 6 a.m., she told me, following a trail that was becoming more disturbing by the hour. Mrs. Peterson, she said, gesturing to her makeshift investigation center, this is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. Over the past 18 hours, Sarah had done something remarkable. Instead of simply reporting the scam and moving on, she'd decided to investigate. She'd created a fake email account and responded to the scammers, pretending to be interested in their grant offer. What she'd uncovered was a sophisticated operation that targeted businesses across the Midwest. Look at this, she said, pointing to a spreadsheet she'd created. I found 12 other companies in Chicago alone that received identical emails in the past month. Same bank letterhead, same grant amount, same processing fee. But here's what's really interesting. They're not randomly targeting businesses. They're specifically going after mid-sized consulting firms, accounting practices, and legal offices. Companies like ours that handle significant amounts of money but might not have the same level of cybersecurity as major corporations. I studied her research, impressed by the thoroughness of her work. Sarah had cross-referenced business directories, checked with the Better Business Bureau, and even reached out to contacts at other companies to verify whether they'd received similar emails. Her methodology was more thorough than some professional investigations I'd seen. But how are they getting our specific information? I asked. The email mentioned our recent contract with the Morrison Group. That information isn't public. Sarah's expression grew serious. That's what worried me too. So I did some digging into our digital footprint. I checked our website, our social media, our press releases from the past year. The information they referenced isn't available publicly, which means either they have access to our internal systems or... She paused, and I could see she was reluctant to voice what she was thinking. Or what, Sarah? Or someone with access to our internal information is feeding it to them. The implications of what she was suggesting hit me like a punch to the gut. A data breach was bad enough, but the possibility of an inside source was infinitely worse. I'd built this company from nothing over the past 8 years, and every employee had been carefully vetted and trusted. The idea that someone on our team might be involved in this scam was almost too painful to consider. I know what you're thinking, Sarah continued, and I don't want to believe it either. But I've been tracking the timeline, and the information they have corresponds with several internal emails and documents that were created in the past 6 months. Whoever is providing this information has access to our project files, our client lists, and our financial records. I slumped back in my chair trying to process what this meant. Our company handled sensitive information for dozens of clients, including financial data, strategic plans, and confidential business relationships. If someone was selling this information to scammers, the potential damage extended far beyond our own company. There's more, Sarah said quietly. I think I know how to catch them. She explained her plan with the precision of a seasoned detective. By continuing to correspond with the scammers while pretending to be interested in their offer, she could gather more information about their operation. She'd already learned that they were operating from multiple locations, using sophisticated technology to mask their true identities and locations. But more importantly, she'd noticed patterns in their communication that suggested they were working with real-time information about our company. When she mentioned in her fake correspondence that our CEO was considering the offer, they immediately knew to address their next email to me specifically. This level of current information could only come from someone with ongoing access to our systems or communications. I want to set a trap, Sarah said. We create false information, something that would only be known if someone was actively monitoring our internal communications. Then we see if that information shows up in their correspondence. Her plan was brilliant in its simplicity. We would craft a fictional piece of internal communication about a major new client or project, something significant enough that the scammers would want to reference it to build credibility. Then we'd monitor who had access to this information and see if it appeared in future scam emails. But as we prepared to implement Sarah's plan, neither of us realized that we were about to uncover something far more sinister than a simple email scam. The investigation that had started with Sarah's sharp eye for detail was about to reveal a network of deception that reached into the highest levels of Chicago's business community. The phone call that would change everything came at 3:17 p.m. that afternoon. The fictional client we created was perfect in its plausibility. Meridian Industries, a supposed manufacturing company looking to expand their operations into the Midwest, with a potential consulting contract worth $1.2 million over 18 months. Sarah and I crafted a detailed backstory, complete with fake meeting notes, project timelines, and even a fabricated initial payment schedule. But here's what made our trap truly sophisticated. We created 3 slightly different versions of the information. Version A mentioned the client was based in Milwaukee, version B said Minneapolis, and version C placed them in Detroit. We then shared each version with a different subset of our employees through what appeared to be routine internal communications. If the scammers reference Milwaukee in their next email, Sarah explained, we'll know the leak is coming from the accounting department. Minneapolis means it's someone in project management, and Detroit points to our senior consultants. We didn't have to wait long. Within 48 hours, Sarah received another email from the bank. This one congratulating us on our recent success with Meridian Industries and suggesting that the grant money could help us expand our capacity to handle larger clients like the one in Minneapolis. Minneapolis. The version we'd shared only with our project management team. I stared at the email in disbelief. Our project management team consisted of just 4 people, all of whom I'd known for years. Marcus had been with us since our 2nd year of operation. Jennifer had joined us after her previous consulting firm was acquired by a larger corporation. David was fresh out of graduate school but had shown incredible promise. And then there was Lisa, my former business partner from a failed venture 5 years ago, who joined our team 18 months ago when she needed a fresh start. I can't believe it's one of them, I said to Sarah, my voice barely audible. But Sarah was already 3 steps ahead. I don't think it's intentional, she said, pulling up another document on her computer. Look at this. She showed me a detailed analysis she'd conducted of our email and file access logs, something I didn't even know our system tracked so comprehensively. What she discovered was that while the Minneapolis version of the Meridian story had only been officially shared with the project management team, the digital trail told a different story. Someone has been accessing files they shouldn't have access to, Sarah explained. Look at these timestamps. 3 days ago at 11:47 p.m., someone logged into David's account and accessed not just the Meridian file, but also client contracts, financial records, and employee personal information. Then the same thing happened with Jennifer's account at 2:23 a.m. the following night. My heart sank as the implications became clear. You're saying someone is hacking into our employees' accounts? Not hacking, Sarah said grimly. Someone with administrative access is using their credentials to access information, then covering their tracks. But they're not quite as clever as they think they are. Our system keeps backup logs that most people don't know about. She pulled up another screen showing a comprehensive audit trail. What we saw was chilling, systematic access to sensitive information over the past 6 months, always during off hours, always using different employee credentials. But the digital fingerprint was consistent. Someone with high-level access to our systems had been methodically stealing information and selling it to scammers. Sarah, I said slowly, who has administrative access to our system? Her face went pale. You, me, and Tom from IT support. Tom Richardson had been our IT contractor for 3 years. He was the one who'd set up our current system, managed our cybersecurity protocols, and had complete administrative access to everything. He was quiet, competent, and had always seemed trustworthy. He was also the one person who would have known about those backup logs and how to avoid them, except he hadn't been quite careful enough. But as we dug deeper into Tom's digital trail, we discovered something that made the situation infinitely more complex. Tom wasn't just selling our information to run-of-the-mill email scammers. He was part of a sophisticated network that was targeting businesses across the entire region. The phone records Sarah had obtained showed regular communication with a number registered to a company called Midwest Business Solutions, a firm that didn't appear to exist beyond a basic website and a virtual office address. But when we cross-referenced that phone number with the Better Business Bureau complaints, we found dozens of reports from businesses that had been targeted by various scams over the past 2 years. Mrs. Peterson, Sarah said, her voice tense with excitement and fear, I think Tom and his associates have been running multiple scam operations simultaneously. The fake grant emails are just one part of it. Look at this. She showed me a pattern she'd identified in the complaint reports. Businesses across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana had reported not just fake grant offers, but also fraudulent invoice scams, fake vendor payments, and bogus investment opportunities. In each case, the scammers had detailed information about the targeted companies that should have been confidential. We weren't just dealing with a single corrupt employee. We'd stumbled onto an organized criminal network that was systematically infiltrating small and medium-sized businesses across the Midwest, stealing their information, and then using that information to run sophisticated scams. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As Sarah continued her investigation, she found something in Tom's communication records that made us both question everything we thought we knew about this case. Tomorrow, Tom was scheduled to make a service call to our office to upgrade our security systems. Tuesday morning arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to seep through the windows of our office. Sarah and I had spent the previous evening coordinating with the FBI's Cybercrime Division, preparing for what they called a controlled confrontation with Tom. Agent Rebecca Martinez had explained that they'd been investigating similar operations across the Midwest for months, but had never been able to get close enough to the organizers to make arrests. Your secretary's investigation has given us more actionable intelligence than 6 months of our own work, Agent Martinez had told us the night before. But we need to be careful. If Tom suspects we're onto him, the entire network could disappear overnight. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Tom would arrive at 10 a.m. for his scheduled security upgrade. Sarah and I would act normally, but our conversation would be monitored by FBI agents positioned in nearby offices. We had a small recording device hidden in my desk drawer, and Agent Martinez was stationed in the building's security office, watching through our camera system. Tom arrived precisely on time, carrying his usual toolkit and laptop bag. He looked exactly as he always did, neat, professional, completely unremarkable. It was hard to believe that this quiet man in his mid-40s had been orchestrating what the FBI estimated was a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," Tom said with his usual polite smile. "Ready to upgrade your security? This new system should protect you from all those email scams we've been hearing about lately." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. I managed to keep my expression neutral as I gestured toward our server room. "That sounds perfect, Tom. Sarah and I were just discussing how important cybersecurity has become." As Tom set up his equipment, Sarah and I engaged in what we hoped sounded like natural conversation about our business operations. But we were actually following a script designed to elicit specific responses from Tom. We mentioned the fictional Meridian Industries contract, discussed our recent financial performance, and talked about our concerns regarding email scams. Tom's reactions were subtle but telling. When we mentioned Meridian Industries, his fingers paused almost imperceptibly on his keyboard. When Sarah mentioned that she'd been getting suspicious emails lately, Tom's head turned slightly toward us, though he continued working. But the moment that confirmed everything came when I casually mentioned that we were considering hiring additional IT security consulting from another firm. Tom's entire demeanor changed. His movements became more deliberate, his questions more probing. "What kind of additional security are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice carefully casual. "I'd hate for you to duplicate services or create conflicting systems." "Oh, just someone to audit our current setup," I replied, watching his face carefully. "Make sure we don't have any vulnerabilities in our email systems or data access protocols." Tom's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I can run a complete security audit for you right now," he said. "No need to bring in outside contractors who might not understand your specific setup." Sarah and I exchanged a glance. Tom was clearly concerned about external scrutiny of our systems. Systems he'd designed with backdoors that allowed him to access our information whenever he wanted. For the next hour, we watched as Tom worked on our computers with an urgency that hadn't been there during his previous visits. He was clearly trying to remove evidence of his unauthorized access, but what he didn't know was that Sarah had already copied all the audit logs to an external drive that was now in FBI custody. The confrontation came when Tom discovered that someone had been accessing the backup logs he thought were hidden. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety, "it looks like your system may have been compromised. Someone has been accessing administrative functions that should be secure. I'm going to need to completely rebuild your security protocols." "That's interesting," I said, my heart pounding. "Sarah, Didn't you mention something about unusual access patterns in our system? Sarah nodded, playing her part perfectly. Yes, I noticed some irregularities in the file access logs. Someone seemed to be logging in during off hours using various employee credentials. Tom's face went completely pale. He knew we knew. I think, he said slowly, there may have been some kind of external intrusion. These criminals are getting very sophisticated. They might have been accessing your system for months without you knowing it. It was a masterful attempt at misdirection. Blame external hackers for the very crimes he'd been committing. But we were ready for this. You know what's strange though, Tom? Sarah said, her voice taking on a harder edge. The access patterns suggest someone with administrative privileges. Someone who knew exactly where to find sensitive information and how to cover their tracks. Someone with intimate knowledge of our system architecture. Tom's hands had stopped moving entirely. He was staring at Sarah with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, dangerous. I think, Tom said quietly, we have a serious security breach on our hands. I'm going to need to take your system offline immediately and conduct a complete forensic investigation. But before he could touch another key, Agent Martinez's voice came through our office intercom system. Thomas Richardson, this is the FBI. Please step away from the computer and place your hands where we can see them. The look of shock on Tom's face was replaced instantly by something much more frightening, the cold, calculating stare of someone who had been running sophisticated criminal operations for years. This wasn't the quiet IT contractor we thought we knew. This was someone else entirely. And in that moment, we realized our investigation had uncovered something far more dangerous than we'd ever imagined. The FBI's raid on Tom's apartment that afternoon revealed the true scope of what we'd uncovered. Agent Martinez called me at 6 p.m. with updates that left me speechless. Tom hadn't just been stealing information from our company. He'd been running a sophisticated criminal enterprise that spanned 3 states and involved dozens of businesses. Your secretary's detective work broke open a case we've been working on for 2 years, Agent Martinez explained. Tom Richardson wasn't even his real name. His actual name is Thomas Kowalski, and he has a record of computer fraud going back 15 years. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The apartment raid had uncovered detailed files on over 200 businesses across the Midwest. Tom had been systematically infiltrating small and medium-sized companies by offering IT services, then using his administrative access to steal confidential information that he sold to various criminal networks. The fake grant scam that Sarah had identified was just one of dozens of fraud schemes running simultaneously. There were fake vendor invoice scams, fraudulent investment schemes, identity theft operations, and even a sophisticated money laundering network that used stolen business information to create shell companies. But here's what made the case truly extraordinary. Tom hadn't been working alone. The FBI's investigation revealed a network of corrupt IT contractors, bookkeepers, and business consultants who were systematically infiltrating businesses across the region. They called themselves the Midwest Network, and their combined operations had stolen an estimated $12 million over the past 3 years. The most incredible part, Agent Martinez told me, is that if your secretary hadn't spotted that single misspelled word in the email, we might never have connected all these cases. Tom and his associates were very good at what they did. Sarah's keen eye for detail hadn't just saved our company $800,000. It had exposed a criminal network that was victimizing hundreds of businesses and thousands of individuals. The FBI's investigation, based on the evidence Sarah had gathered, led to arrests across Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan. But the story doesn't end there. 3 weeks after Tom's arrest, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I offered Sarah a promotion to Chief Operating Officer and asked her to head up a new division of our company, cybersecurity consulting for small and medium-sized businesses. You've shown that you have investigative skills that surpass most professional security consultants, I told her. And you understand how these criminals think because you've been inside their operation. Sarah accepted the position, and within 6 months, our cybersecurity division had become one of the most respected in the region. We developed training programs to help businesses identify sophisticated scams, implemented security protocols that protected against insider threats, and worked directly with law enforcement to investigate cybercrime. The case also led to significant changes in how IT services are regulated in our state. New laws now require background checks for anyone with administrative access to business systems, and there are mandatory reporting requirements for suspicious network activity. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was personal. Sarah's work on the case earned her recognition from the FBI, the Better Business Bureau, and the Illinois State Police. She was invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences across the country, and her story became a case study taught in business schools and criminal justice programs. 6 months after the arrests, Agent Martinez called with the final update. "The convictions are final," she said. Tom Kowalski received 8 years in federal prison, and his associates received sentences ranging from 3 to 6 years. But more importantly, we've recovered over $8 million in stolen funds and returned it to the businesses that were victimized. As I hung up the phone, I looked across the office at Sarah, who was training a new team of cybersecurity specialists. The quiet, detail-oriented secretary who had saved our company with her sharp eye had become one of the most respected cybersecurity experts in the region. But the real lesson of this story isn't about cybercrime or even about Sarah's remarkable detective skills. It's about the power of paying attention to details that others overlook, trusting your instincts when something doesn't seem right, and having the courage to investigate when you suspect something is wrong. That single misspelled word, compliance instead of compliance, had seemed like such a small thing. But it was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled an entire criminal network. Sarah's decision to investigate rather than simply report the scam led to one of the largest cybercrime prosecutions in our state's history. Today our company is stronger than ever. Our cybersecurity division has helped protect hundreds of businesses from fraud, and Sarah's story has inspired countless people to trust their instincts and pay attention to the details that others might miss. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the smallest observations. A misspelled word, a grammatical error, a detail that doesn't quite fit. In Sarah's case, those small inconsistencies revealed a truth that was far more significant than anyone could have imagined. The businesswoman in this story, that was me. But the real hero was my secretary, whose incredible attention to detail and unwavering determination to investigate the truth saved not just our company, but hundreds of other businesses across the Midwest. And that truly was incredible.